Good morning and welcome to the Westside Economic Alliance Bring Your Own Breakfast Forum. So we normally refer to these as breakfast forums, but we hope everyone's enjoying a cup of coffee, your favorite beverage, and a bagel or something good from the kitchen. Thank you for joining us. I'm really pleased to be offering up some great information this morning. We have about 240 people registered for this forum, so it's a big crowd. We are going to be taking questions, so I'm going to explain the format to you in just a few minutes. But at this time, what I'd like to do is recognize our board members that are with us today. Teresa, do you have that screen for us? Thank you. So we have quite a few board members in attendance this morning. Our board is a very active board and participates in just about everything that we do. So on the board list here, you can also see our two sponsors. Our board member from Northwest Natural is Nina Carlson, and Nina worked hard to pull this program together this morning, so thank you to her. And also Gina Cole from Legacy Health. Legacy Health is our breakfast series sponsor, so I want to recognize both of those board members along with everyone else this morning. We also have a number of elected officials with us today, and those people will be on the screen momentarily. We have elected officials from around the region, and we have folks from the legislature, from Metro, Clackamas County, Washington County, the City of Cornelius, City of Forest Grove, City of Sherwood, City of West Lynn, City of Wilsonville, and also from our Tualatin Valley Water District Board. So thank you for all the work that you do as elected officials for us throughout this region. It's greatly appreciated, and thank you for being here this morning. So with that, I would like to move to thank again our breakfast series sponsor. Our breakfast series sponsor, as I mentioned before, is Legacy Health. And Legacy Health wanted me to share with you just a quick bit here. During these uncertain times, it's important to remember that while a lot has been put on hold, your health doesn't pause for COVID-19. If you have postponed elective procedures or routine preventative care, Legacy wants to assure you that Oregon hospitals stand ready to offer compassionate and skilled care meeting the highest standards in safety. Legacy is open and ready to provide the care that you have come to expect, with in-person medical appointments and telephone or virtual office visits from the comfort of your own home. Legacy is thankful to its Washington County and Clackamas County neighbors for staying at home, practicing social distancing, and wearing masks in public. As always, and especially during this time, your health and wellness are more important than ever. Hospitals are safe, they are open, and they are ready to take care of your family and your needs. So thank you for that to Legacy Health. And at this point, I'd like to introduce Catherine Williams, and Catherine is from Northwest Natural. Catherine has been an active member of Westside Economic Alliance actually throughout her career. So we're really pleased to have her here with us this morning to share a few words about Northwest Natural. Catherine is the Vice President of Public Affairs and Sustainability, and we appreciate your sponsorship, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Pam, and good morning to everybody. It's lovely to see at least a few 2x3-inch rectangle faces across my screen. On behalf of Northwest Natural, I'm really pleased to be welcoming you to this morning's forum with economist Josh Lehner. And before passing it back to Pam, who will properly introduce Mr. Lehner, I just had a few quick comments. To say that these are uncertain times really feels like a bit of an understatement. And I've been looking back through Oregon's history and how it is really intertwined with Northwest Natural's history. The utility celebrated our 160th anniversary last year, and we're just a few weeks older than Oregon's statehood in 1859. The way we have delivered energy has really evolved and changed multiple times over the past century and a half. And right now we are laser focused on becoming one of the first gas utilities in the country to decarbonize our pipeline with investments in renewable natural gas and hydrogen. And we have some potential partners right here in Washington County, so we're well on our way. Earlier this week, I was able to participate in a meeting just like this on a Zoom call with several other utilities and stakeholders. And something Sherry Vilmark at the Community Energy Project said really struck me, and I've been thinking about it since she said it. Reflecting on the times that we're in, Sherry shared the following quote: "We are all in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat." As we've been reaching out to customers and other community partners, we're reminded that while some of us are privileged to have boats that can ride out the storm with pretty minimal damage, others are really finding themselves shipwrecked. And to lift each other up and ensure we come out of this period stronger than before, we really need to partner with each other. We need partnerships more than ever. And we need to prioritize the most vulnerable in our communities with a focus on people of color and all of those who've been the victim of systemic and persistent racism. And Northwest Natural is committed to being part of this change. We've partnered with our communities in the face of the pandemic, including contributing funds to local jurisdictions for small business grants. And quickly, I just want to acknowledge and thank the Washington County Commissioners and really all elected leaders who are leaning in, and the Commission for their decision to use federal CARES dollars to stand up business recovery centers at Hillsborough, Tualatin, and Beaverton Chambers. And with lots of local nonprofits, I want to call out Adelante Mujeres in particular, who are working with businesses addressing reopening and COVID-related needs. Northwest Natural employees have been enthusiastically supporting local restaurants during our Takeout Tuesday campaign. It really encourages employees and customers to support restaurants throughout our service territory. And last but not least, I want to thank my colleague and WEA board member, Nina Carlson. She's been working overtime with business associations, local jurisdictions, and other partners. And though Nina and I haven't been in the same building since mid-March, her passion and enthusiasm have really been inspiring to me. So on behalf of Northwest Natural, I want to thank Westside for the opportunity to greet everybody this morning. And with that, I'll pass it back to Pam.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And again, thank you for the sponsorship from Northwest Natural, and thank you for everything that you're doing for our community during these difficult times. There's no question that we're all in this together, and I really enjoyed the quote and the story behind the all boats. We're all in the same boat, but not exactly the same. So thank you for that. I'd like to take this opportunity now to introduce Josh. This breakfast forum is titled "A Regional Economic Outlook: The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly," and I really want to emphasize that this is not a situation where we've asked Josh to focus just on the ugly. He is definitely very good at providing a whole picture, and we've had experience with Josh doing presentations as an economist and does a fabulous job. It's not easy to do a presentation from the standpoint of being an economist, and Josh interjects some humor and also some thought-provoking ideas as we go along. Josh earned a BA in economics from the University of Colorado and an MS in economics from Portland State University. Outside of work, he enjoys spending time with his wife and kids, traveling around the state, and consuming Oregon craft beverages. So in order to thank him, we may have to send him a keg or something. But with that, I'd like to remind everybody that you can ask questions in the Q&A portion, please. And Josh will be speaking for about 20 to 25 minutes. And from there, we'll move into Q&A and be able to have a conversation with him. I also want to call your attention to the fact that we did send you a copy of our program. And what's interesting is that normally in at the Embassy Suites, these would be on your tables. You'd be looking at them as the presenter speaks, and now they're on your desktop. So we're trying to normalize this as much as possible and provide you with as much information as we can. So with that, I'd like to thank Josh for being with us and turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Pam. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys all this morning, even if it is virtually and not in person, as normally the case. Unfortunately, I don't bring a lot of good news today. There is one, there's one little bit of silver lining, and that is that the technical recession is very likely over. It was a very swift, very severe drop in economic activity as we suppressed the economy to stop the spread of a deadly contagious disease and not overwhelm the healthcare system. And so we're in a very, very severe recession. It's going to take us a multi-year period to dig out of, but it's very likely that it's not getting worse from here, at least in economic speak. Now, the bad news is economists define a recession as only the decline, as you're going from the peak of economic activity to the trough of economic activity, the downturn, just the descent, the decline is the recession. And then from there, you have a recovery. But that's not how normal people define a recession. A recession is to most people is when things are bad. And unfortunately, by that definition, we have a ways to go. We have a big hole to dig our way out of, but we should be on the ascent from here on out, barring some other sort of second wave of the virus leading to more social distancing or another round of firm closures and layoffs in the months or quarters ahead. And that is unknown right now, but our baseline forecast is that the worst is behind us. Consumer spending is up, jobs will be up in the next couple of months and the like, but it'll take a while to fully recover. And so this morning, I wanted to share a few things from our office. Can somebody allow me to share my screen, please? Our office released our economic forecast and revenue forecast to the state, to the legislature a couple weeks ago. And I wanted to share parts of that release with you this morning in talking about the overall economic outlook. Here we go. Thank you. Okay. First of all, we are in that severe recession, as I was saying. This chart, the way you read a chart like this, is you start at the 0% over on the left. That is where you are in the economy at the peak of the business cycle before you fall into recession. As you drop down below the zero line, that is the severity of the recession. In Oregon, this is percentage of your jobs that are lost. And then as you work your way back up to the right, that is you in recovery, regaining all of your lost jobs. Once you hit zero again, you have as many jobs then as you did prior to the recession. And as you get above zero, you're at an all-time high for employment. And so you can see the current cycle in red, or forecast for the current cycle in red, relative to the last 4 recessions in Oregon, going back to the early 1980s, which was our Great Recession, really, in Oregon. You can see the red line looks nothing like any of the other past cycles we have seen. Overnight, we shut down the economy again to stop the spread of the disease or to slow the spread. And so the economic activity fell off a cliff, much like it does in a natural disaster or in a labor strike, is not normal business cycle patterns. The recovery coming out of it, we think, will be unusual as well. We expect a big, strong initial rebound here in the months and quarters ahead as these social distancing restrictions continue to lift. As we enter into no one is about to enter phase 1, but as most counties are in phase 2, and then whatever 3 and 4 entail, economic activity will come back. We're going to get a large chunk of those lost jobs back pretty quickly, but that recovery will be far from complete. It won't be 100%. We're not going to be back to normal in a matter of months. We think it's going to be a matter of years. You can see here, we don't regain all of our lost jobs for 4 years. So it's a 4-year cycle as opposed to a 7 or 8 year cycle like we saw last decade. And that's for 3 main reasons. We think this cycle will be better because there's not a big economic problem. This was a recession driven entirely by public health and a pandemic. There's not an IT bubble. There's not a housing bubble that we need to fix and correct before the economy can grow again. And so it's really about getting control of the virus, and then the economy should follow suit. Second reason would be that the policies have been quite swift by legislative standards, particularly at the federal level, with a lot of aid to households and to firms to keep them afloat. And so they shouldn't have a lot of problems, at least in the near term. We're going to need more assistance for households and for firms. But the assistance from the federal programs has been quite beneficial. So there's a couple of main reasons why we think the overall economy should do better than the last cycle in terms of the recovery path. I think the key here is people are wondering, well, what's going to turn us, from a recession into a recovery? And it's the concept of pent-up demand. This chart shows you our forecast for Oregon income and Oregon consumer spending in gray. This forecast relative to the previous forecast, which is our pre-pandemic forecast, and then the arrows highlight the key points along this path, this timeline. You can see we suppressed economic activity considerably during the strict social distancing phases, the sheltering in place style policies. Households were unable to spend as much money as they normally do. You couldn't go out to eat. You couldn't go to stores. We bought more things online, but that didn't necessarily make up for all the normal spending that we do. And so the savings rate nationwide and here in Oregon skyrocketed the last couple of months as a result. Now, this is a temporary phenomenon, and as these social distancing restrictions continue to phase out, people test the waters a little bit more. They're getting more comfortable going out to eat or going to the stores. You can just see it in your everyday life a little bit that when I go get takeout food from a restaurant, there's now people sitting inside eating, which is, my family might not be there yet. Maybe I'm a little bit more scared, but, we're starting to see people test those waters to a larger degree. Traffic on the roads is higher. Foot traffic when you go to Costco or Walmart or whatnot is increasing. So as people get more comfortable doing this, they're allowed to go out and spend more money, where this concept of pent-up demand and consumer spending returning will turn us from a recession into recovery. And this phase is well underway today. Now, again, this is not a complete recovery, but it's the turning point, and we're now on the upswing due to this concept of pent-up demand. You'll notice that these lines here in gray are below zero. That means our forecast has been reduced relative to our previous expectations due to the recession and some persistent damage in the long run, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But it's important to keep in mind, I'm trying to look at some of the comments people are making. Important to keep in mind that while this forecast has been reduced relative to our previous expectations due to the recession, we're not calling for the economy to plunge forever, right? We're not going to see declines this year and next year and the year after and dig a massive hole. The massive hole we dug happened overnight, and we're now starting to claw our way out of it. And so this next slide kind of shows you our forecast for total personal income in Oregon, both our previous forecast and our current one. And you can see that gap between the previous forecast dotted line and the bars, that is the reduction in the forecast, but personal income in the state is really kind of flat the next couple of years. Instead of plunging like it normally does in a recession, we think this one is unique, where these federal assistance programs, the one-time recovery rebates that most of us got a direct deposit in our bank accounts, about the lower, the bottom 95% of Oregonians on the income distribution. It's really only the top 5% or so earn too much money to get one of these recovery rebates. The bottom 95% of us, we got a recovery rebate. That's the red bar. But the real assistance is coming in the form of expanded unemployment insurance benefits to Oregonians. Not just the regular unemployment insurance system pays about 45% of your lost wages for the typical unemployed Oregonian, but the extra $600 a week is a big boon people that have been directly impacted by the pandemic. So while the one-time recovery rebate has been helpful, help stimulate household spending or keep them afloat, not fall behind on mortgage payments or rent payments, it's really the unemployment insurance system that's targeted to those in need. And so that extra $600 has been quite beneficial. Oregon, we're going to get about $7 billion in total unemployment insurance compensation this year and next. A lot of that has to do with that beefed up benefits so that workers didn't have to choose between being healthy and staying home or being in financial ruin. And so that's the policy implications behind that. But of course, that's going to phase out here in the next couple of months. And so then we'll see whether the federal assistance continues. They're talking about making a return to work credit instead of an unemployment insurance bonus. So we'll see exactly where federal policy is lined up, but we're going to need some more assistance because the economy won't be fully healthy in July or August when these benefits start to phase out at the federal level. And we're seeing massive layoffs, right? We're seeing unemployment rate around 14% in Oregon. We think it's going to get worse in the May report when that comes out next week. But, you know, it's going to be something else entirely if we don't have companies left over after the pandemic to hire the workers back. This is really where one of the key macroeconomic concerns lies, is this concept of permanent damage. You know, even in good economic times, about 10% of Oregon companies close their doors every year for a variety of reasons, whether it's, you know, operational issues or revenue issues or whatnot. But we know this is going to go up. It goes up in every recession. Went up to 14% in the Great Recession just a few years ago. 14% of businesses closed overnight. We think it's going to go a lot higher than that due to the shutdown today. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that small businesses, you know, it's always hard to be an entrepreneur. It's always hard to run a business. Small businesses don't have a lot of liquid reserves. Most of them have 1 or 2 months of reserves on hand, and the pandemic has already lasted longer than that. So we're very concerned about business closures. Other issues to consider when it comes to this is that, you know, small businesses or new businesses in particular are the drivers of productivity and long run innovations and some of that long run economic growth. And so if we lose a lot of these businesses, it's going to take a while to rebuild that stock of economic activity to help propel us into the future, which is where some things like the federal PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program from the Small Business Administration, is really, really helpful. About 20% of small businesses in Oregon look to have received a PPP. We don't necessarily know how many applied, but about 1 in 5 actually got a loan, totaling about $7 billion. These are very, very beneficial. The program didn't come in time to save everyone. We know that, unfortunately, but it's been very, very beneficial for these firms. Unfortunately, it's a really short-term Band-Aid. It was designed originally that this money could be spent over 8 weeks, so 2 months, right? You get it if you got your money, you got it in late March or during April. If you do the math on that, you start the clock on when those 8 weeks run out. Well, we're starting to come up upon that now. So what happens now that those 8 weeks of the Small Business Survival Program are going to start to run out? What are we going to see? Are we going to see another round of closures, another round of layoffs? Hopefully not. That would be really bad for the economy. Are we going to see some sort of continued assistance at the federal level to help tide over the businesses, many of which, you know, were solvent. They were good, solid businesses to begin with. But when you plunge revenues overnight, you know, that creates a lot of economic and business problems. And so we'll see. This is a very big risk to the outlook, again, because it's not so much just that we have massive unemployment that's going to take a while to hire workers back, is we got to have the firms there too to hire the workers back on the other side. So this is kind of the big picture economic risk that we're worried about, both at the state and at the U.S. level. Locally, another risk is the concept of Oregon's comparative advantage, which is migration, right? Of course, people have been packing up and moving to this part of the world really since the dawn of time. Since before Lewis and Clark, people have wanted to live in this part of the world. In good times and bad, people continue to move into Oregon more than they move out of Oregon. But that said, people follow the job opportunities. People move for 2 reasons. They move for job opportunities and for housing opportunities, or better housing or more affordable housing or the like. And so we're going to see migration this year and next. We reduced that forecast by about 30%. So you can see those first couple of light blue bars are a lot lower. We've reduced that forecast, but then as the job opportunities come, as the economy starts to rebound, we think migration flows will return and perk up as the expansion gets going. But this has been a reduction relative to previous expectations, entirely due to the recession. Longer run, we still expect Oregon to be an attractive place to live. Again, the people move here for job opportunities, which we think will come back. They move here for the scenic beauty, the second paycheck of living in such a wonderful climate and geographic location and the like. That should still be in place. And then they also move for the fact that while we have terrible housing affordability, it's not the worst on the West Coast. So that makes us a little bit relatively better off than some of our neighbors to the north and to the south, even though it's still a very bad situation and we need to continue to address our housing supply concerns. So I think This is a concept of permanent damage for Oregon. And the key here is not that we just want to attract people to attract people. What we mostly attract are young, skilled, working age households moving to Oregon to start their careers. They mostly move in their 20s and a little bit in their 30s. That's the bulk of the people who move. And so once they move here, they provide an ample supply of mostly young, skilled labor for businesses to hire and to expand. This has been one of our longest competitive strengths that we have as a state, and a lot of the other smaller Western states too, is this ability to attract people and to grow our economy via that route. So if we put this all together and we think about, which industries do we think will do better in the years ahead, which industries maybe will lag a little bit, won't grow quite as quickly, which regions of the state have been the hardest hit so far in the recession, we get a chart that kind of looks like the next slide, which is a bubble of the different regional economies in Oregon. On the vertical axis, up and down, is how hard have you been hit to date? What share of your local labor force has applied for unemployment insurance benefits? And you can see on the vertical axis up and down, who's the hardest hit? It's the North Coast and in Central Oregon, right? These are places that are very tourism dependent. Leisure and hospitality accounts for a larger segment of their economy than it does in a lot of places around the country. And so with bars and restaurants and nail salons being shut down during the shelter in place style, policies, these are the places that have seen the most economic pain to date. Places like Portland and Beaverton and Salem and Eugene, they've been kind of hit to an average degree relative to the statewide numbers and relative to the U.S. numbers for that matter. Places that have lower numbers of leisure and hospitality, like down in Klamath or Harney counties, they have been impacted the least to date. If we switch to a forward-looking measure on the x-axis, left and right, it's an industrial structure look where we're looking at how many jobs do you have in construction in your local economy, how many jobs in manufacturing, in healthcare, and the like, and then we're kind of mapping that local mix of industries to our office's statewide industry forecast. And if you're further to the right, it looks like you have some industrial tailwinds where the industries that you specialize in are those that are expected to grow faster in the years ahead. If you're to the left on the x-axis, that means you have a lot of jobs and industries that we don't think will grow as well or as quickly as some of the other sectors. So you have maybe some industrial structure headwinds that you're facing. And so one thing you'll notice is that the urban areas, the metropolitan areas of Oregon are all towards the right. They're all expected to do better. A lot of this has to do with the exposure to office-based work, professional business services, in particular, some finance, some insurance, some information, which would, in Washington County's case, that would be data centers and the like, are all expected to grow pretty robustly in the years ahead. And those tend to be concentrated in our metropolitan areas. It's important to point out that while leisure and hospitality has been sort of the tip of the spear for this recession with the closures of the bars and the restaurants, as of a couple months ago, we don't think there's going to be a lot of permanent damage in leisure and hospitality. Americans have been going out to eat more and more every year for 50, 60 years now, right? To the point where we now spend as much money going out to eat as we do at the grocery store. Now, going out to eat costs a lot more per meal, right? So we're still cooking most of our meals at home or microwaving them or whatnot. But we're now spending as much money going out to eat. And I don't think that sort of long-run societal trend is going to reverse itself. Now, this year and next is going to be really tough on bars and restaurants and travel-related industries and businesses that are tied to it. It's going to be really hard. But coming out the other side, in a few years, certainly a decade from now, I don't see any reason why we should expect that leisure and hospitality should be a smaller share of the economy, or that we won't need as many bars or restaurants to keep up with population growth and the like. Now, again, that's hurt the North Coast and Deschutes in Central Oregon today, but I think long run, that's actually a strength because that sector should come all the way back. What we don't think is going to come all the way back, unfortunately, would be our goods producing industries. So our natural resources, logging in particular, and our manufacturers, they always tend to take a step back in a recession. And while they grow in an expansion, they don't fully regain all of their lost jobs. So these losses in our goods producing industries are expected to weigh on some of our regional economies moving forward. And we're very concerned about that. It's not so much that the pizza parlor shut down during the shelter-in-place style policies. It's that if the mill goes out too, we're going to have longer run problems. And no matter how much assistance you give to that pizza parlor, if that regional anchor employer, it could be a hospital, it could be a university, it could be a mill, it could be a factory of some sort, it could be, it could be some office-based work where they're, telecommuting or consulting with people outside of the state. Whatever, however you want to define a regional anchor employer, if they go out because of the recession dynamics, that's going to weigh on the entire economy. So that's what we're really concerned about, is the loss of those regional anchor employers, loss of some of these goods producing industries, because they don't tend to come back during the recession. So the longer this all drags out, the more severe the decline is, the less of a rebound we get, the more permanent damage will accumulate, and it'll have some of these geographic patterns across states. So if we divide up these bubbles and we look at individual counties, obviously Washington will look really good. I think Multnomah County is number 1, Deschutes is number 2, then maybe Corvallis, Benton County, but then we start to get into Washington and Lane and Clackamas. They're following suit. The industrial structure in the entire Portland metro area looks pretty good from our vantage point of what we believe the economy will look like in the years to come. Now, as you can imagine, with a severe recession, and a semi-protracted recovery that's going to take years to come back from, this directly translates into a lot of reduced revenues for the public sector. And the recessions are especially hard for policymakers, because not only are you dealing with reduced revenues, you're dealing with an increase in caseloads as people need more assistance during downturn for some of the the health and the income maintenance support programs and the like. And so this table here is just a quick summary of what we presented to the legislature a couple weeks ago. These are changes in our current forecast relative to our previous forecast. So even as you see negatives a couple years down the road, again, this isn't that we expect the economy to crater each and every year over the next 5 years. It's that our beliefs of Oregon's economy and therefore tax revenues will be lower 5 years from now, 10 years from now, than we did prior to the pandemic, due to the recession, due to some of that permanent damage, due to lower levels of migration. We think Oregon in 2025 will be a smaller state than we had previously forecasted Oregon to be in 2025. So that's where the negatives come from. It's that delta, the change in the forecast over the last couple of months, not that we think it's going to crater. So to turn some of these, hundreds of millions and billions of dollars of revenue into percentages, which are obviously easier to interpret if you're not familiar with the state budget, we reduced the general fund forecast by 10 to 15%. This is the main source of discretionary spending for the legislature, where they have a little bit more control over how they allocate this. But these are big changes. They're in for a lot of adjustments in the months ahead, as they maybe have a special session or wait to deal with it in the coming quarters. We reduced the lottery forecast by about 15 to 20%, in large part because when the bars and restaurants were shut down, the video lottery terminals were turned off as well. So we got very little money during that phase on the video lottery side of things, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because that means there was more money staying in the pockets of Oregon households during that time and not going into the terminals. But it's a big reduction in that. The good news here, in terms of the indicators of what it means, is there's a pent-up demand for consumer spending. There's pent-up demand for video lottery in particular. Now, as these machines are coming back online around the state, we're seeing a big spike in sales. Again, not all the way back, but they're running about maybe 60% what they were here in these first couple of weeks of reopening. So people are getting out, they're testing the waters, economic activity is returning, and we're seeing that on those video lottery sales as well. We reduced the new corporate activity tax, the new gross receipts tax in Oregon that just went into effect this year. We reduced that a little bit more, 20 to 25%, which is a big reduction. This has to do mostly with the recession and the recessionary dynamics. With lower levels of consumer spending in a recession, obviously businesses are going to have fewer gross receipts, so therefore there'll be less tax revenue. But we also made a smaller reduction to the underlying estimates of this due to some of the changes we've seen in the economy, and we are trying to benchmark, this new tax relative to Ohio, which has a gross receipts tax, and some new data that's come out suggests that the Oregon-Ohio relationship is a little bit different than we had previously assumed as those estimates were developing. And I guess kind of the lone bright spot for the revenue side of things, I don't know if this is a bright spot on the health side of things, is as Oregonians, we're doing a very good job of self-medicating during the pandemic. We've seen record levels of liquor sales and marijuana sales in the last couple of months. That translates into more money for the state. But you can see here, it's not a lot of money. It's still more money. It's still helping provide services for, law enforcement and education and the general budget and things like that. But it doesn't nearly offset some of the declines we're seeing elsewhere. But that is one positive change we saw in the forecast, whereas everything else was all negative due to the recession. So with that, that's everything I had prepared for today. I would love to take questions if you have them this morning. Otherwise, my contact information is here. I'm always happy to chat. Please reach out via email, phone, follow us on Twitter if you're interested in the type of work that our office provides. With that, I'll release the screen, and thank you for your time.
Josh, thank you very much. We've got a series of questions in our Q&A, and I'd like to read them and ask you to respond. So from Gwen Baldwin, we have this question. State leadership is looking to infrastructure bonding to help with recovery. What are the pros and cons of also looking to revenue bonding as a recovery/stimulus tool, especially with the projected revenue loss for the next few biennium?
That's a good question. I think using some bonding authority right now, given the low interest rate environment, is very prudent. If we're talking about capital construction, bridge and roads and things like that, obviously, those have a very long lead time. So they're not going to help tomorrow. But given the low interest rates, our advice to policymakers, and we're not a policy shop, we're a data monkey shop. Our advice is to take advantage of that, and really any investment today will probably pay for itself, whether you want to talk about early childhood education investments, rural broadband, which that is a very big concern, particularly if we're going to be distance learning for education for who knows how long, or classic capital construction projects, right? Like using some of that bonding authority absolutely makes a lot of sense for a variety of reasons. On the bonding for operations, this was a question that came up. Our main advisory group, the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors, met with the governor and legislative leadership a couple weeks ago, and this question came up of whether not just bonding for projects, but for operations. And this happens a lot of times on, obviously corporations do this all the time. And so, it's something that they're thinking about. I don't think anyone gave a clear recommendation, but it's something you got to take into consideration, because when we did it in the 2001, 2003 biennium in recession, it took 10 years to pay that off. So bonding for operations takes a while to pay off. So it's something that policymakers may consider, but yeah, it's something that's fairly new to governments, but it certainly isn't new in the corporate world. And I think that conversation maybe is just getting started.
Thank you. Kevin Brady asks, with the decline in the need for office and retail at physical properties, do you see opportunities for conversion of those properties to housing, which still comprises a high demand?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that has been an idea that has been gaining traction in the planning world and for quite some time, where when you start to lose some of those big anchor employers, particularly in whether it's a regional mall or a strip mall or a development or whatnot, what do you do, right? It's very hard to fill that amount of square footage overnight, certainly in a matter of years. So turning some of that prime land, and by prime, I mean it tends to be on a transit line, it tends to be on major corridors, so you have good transportation access, into something housing related can make a lot of sense if you can't repurpose it and fill it with another retail store. Now, quick tangent on that, been talking with a lot of county assessors recently, because they're very concerned about property taxes. On the residential side, we think things are pretty good. Home prices are holding up. Actually, the new sales data came out this morning. Housing, home sales have done really well last couple of months, certainly better than expected. We do think home price appreciation will be okay. The concern there on the property tax is delinquencies and whether people will have the ability to pay in November when the bills come due. On the commercial side, as you're indicating with the question, as businesses go out and they close, they're going to have a lot of vacancies in retail and warehouse and industrial space and the like, and that's going to weigh not only on delinquencies probably from property tax collections, but also on future valuations. with a lot of vacancies, that means the value of the property is going down. And that won't hit this year's property tax collections, but that'll hit in years 2 and 3 down the line. So that's assessors and the local governments that rely on property taxes are very concerned about that potential dynamic.
Thank you. Rob Drake asked this question. Josh, how much higher in percentage is the unemployment level for people of color in Oregon?
I don't have that offhand. It's definitely higher, particularly for our Black Oregonians and our American Indian Oregonians. Those tend to be some of the highest. I know the poverty rates data. Poverty for our communities of color tends to be twice that what it is for our non-Hispanic white population. And I don't think the unemployment rates are quite twice as high, but they're, I think, more like 50, 70% higher than it is for the white population.
Thank you. Razia Rushan asked this question. Are these migration flows only additional to existing Oregon residents, or does it also reflect people moving out to follow non-Oregon opportunities?
They're net data, right? They're both. It's the number of people moving in minus the number of people moving out. So it's that net component, the net increase on top of it.
Thank you. This question comes from Jerry Johnson. So this is economist to economist here. Josh, do you see any persistent impacts on preferences from this? I am specifically interested in mass transit and housing forms, but have also heard that landlords have a reduced interest in restaurants as a tenant type.
I think, Jerry's asking the right questions. I think it's too early to know for sure exactly what that will be. On the residential side of things, we're not a very dense state, right? We have a lot of low density outside of the Pearl District. Even the city of Portland's pretty low density. And so that is different than Manhattan. That's different than the peninsula in San Francisco, right? And so, whether that's more attractive or not, we will see. The question then becomes, even in Oregon, does it increase the attractiveness of Hillsborough and Gresham relative to Portland? Or does that mean you're going to telecommute from Eugene or Bend or Hood River or Pendleton or whatever the case may be? I think that dynamic will certainly be interesting to follow. The key point there is that these teams aren't going to change a ton. We're not going to see mass outmigration of the city center of Portland. But if you see a little change on the margin, just a 1/10 or 2 of a percentage point here or there, that has massive ramifications for the type of housing we need, where that housing is, our other infrastructure needs, and the like. On the commercial side, the concern I have from an economic perspective is not that we're going to see a lot of bars and restaurant closures. And we always see a lot of bars and restaurant closures. It's hard business. The concern is, even if you have a great idea for a new bar or restaurant, is a bank going to give you money in August or September to start that up? The answer is no, not unless we have some sort of clarity on the virus. Because if we get a resurgence in the cases in the winter, like you just opened a brand new bar and restaurant, they invested a lot of money, gave you a loan, and then you're going to get shut down and out of business overnight again through no fault of your own. So I think that lending there. So Jerry indicating that some landlords are, saying, I don't want to have a bar or a restaurant. I could definitely see that playing out at least this year and next, where we have the greatest uncertainty and concerns. Longer run, I don't think there's going to be a problem, but certainly in the next couple of years.
Great, thank you. John Cook asked this question. In actual dollars, not compared to forecast, will the income taxes still be neutral or increase due to the fact that unemployment insurance is still taxable income?
They'll be relatively flat. I showed our total personal income forecast, earlier in the presentation, which is basically flat for 2 years. Now, the taxable component of that is down a little bit this year. Those one-time recovery rebates aren't taxable. The unemployment insurance is only taxable above a certain threshold. So your first handful of checks from the unemployment insurance isn't taxed, but then after that, it is taxed. And there's other changes associated with the CARES Act, things like the net operating losses for businesses that you can carry back a few years. That's going to have a negative impact on state revenues to help businesses stay afloat, of course. So there's a variety of things where actual tax collections this year, or at least in the next 12 months, will be down, but overall, it's more steady than plunging, I would say.
Great, thank you. Tom Holt asks this question. The COVID closures really exposed many small businesses as well as government agencies' inability to serve consumers online. If this sparks greater investment in IT and web services broadly, do you think that will be a particular advantage for Oregon's tech sector?
Absolutely. That's a good question, Tom. I think first and foremost, that will create more demand for data centers, and Oregon has a lot of data centers, which provide relatively few jobs, but really good paying jobs at that. And so that's a boon. I think it would be a boon for our largest employer, our largest tech employer, in terms of the chips that go into the servers. That would be a big boon. And I think the opportunities where Oregon has really come quite a ways in growing our software sector. So developing applications and developing programs to service more e-commerce would be an opportunity. Whether or not Oregon capitalizes on that more than Seattle or San Francisco or Austin or whatnot, it's hard to speculate today, but you would think that that's our largest growth sector in tech would be on that software development side, and you would think we would get some opportunities there.
Great. So Lane Alfonso asks if we're going to be sending out the presentation slides. Josh, I trust that you will share your slides with us, and we will be posting them on our website. Ed Trumke asks, for local governments dependent on property taxes, was there a lag or delay in collections in the 2007 through 2010 era? Any comparisons to the current situation?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a delay in public sector revenues because you generally tax after the fact, right? Whatever you did during this calendar year, you pay in taxes the next April. In the case of property taxes, right, you get the January 1st valuation, but you don't pay until November. And so I think the concern right now is that household incomes are doing okay. Those unemployment insurance benefits are keeping people's heads above water. But if those really do expire next month and nothing comes after that, I don't know if the household's ability to pay in November is the same as it is today. In fact, well, it will be less. So I think the concern there, in talking with property tax districts around the state, some of them are making up new estimates of what they think the delinquencies will be. Some of them are going with what they saw in the Great Recession, and they're saying that's what we're going to budget for, just to be safe or whatnot. I don't deal with property taxes, so I don't know entirely, but I think the concern isn't necessarily on the residential side, it's not valuations, it's ability to pay. On the commercial side, it's ability to pay and valuations. So I think those are the risks.
Great, thank you. Stephen Roberts from Washington County asks, are there any insights into housing starts? What are your thoughts there?
So we built in a real recession into all of our housing related forecasts: construction, wood products, logging, starts, of the magnitude about 20% drop, and then it takes 2 years to get back. So faster than the overall economy, but we did build in a big reduction. Housing has been an upside surprise relative to that forecast the last couple of months. The question is, do these near-term dynamics of where higher income households haven't been impacted as much during the recession? So, mostly been lower wage service sector workers that have been laid off, and they tend to be more renters than owners. So we have low interest rates and high income households that haven't been impacted as much. So housing has been propped up. So the question is, does this continue forever? Or, is this just not going to drag down housing like it normally would in a recession? Or will some of those more longer term recessionary dynamics take hold? Where housing starts to drop, we have that lower levels of migration means less household formation in the years ahead and the like, which is where our thinking is, but there's certainly upside risks associated with our housing forecast. The sales data has been great. The permits have dropped the last couple of months at the US and in the Oregon level. So we'll see it to play out. If those sales continue strong, you can't have a big drop in activity while sales continue to be strong. So those will have to balance out, certainly.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Paul Savas asked this question. For families, personal incomes versus inflation and affordability pressures, is it likely to trend towards more families falling into poverty?
Poverty,
Tough one.
yeah, poverty rates and caseloads for needs-based programs always increase in recession. So I don't think that's avoidable. You know, and there's certain segments of the population, primarily our communities of color, primarily our workers and households with lower levels of educational attainment and the like, that really only benefit during full employment, during a really strong economy. And so they tend to fall the most during a recession. Their incomes drop the most. They're unable to find jobs. And then a couple years into the recovery, they're able to land jobs. So they go from really low income to the regular low income, for lack of a better word. But the only base gain in the labor market when you see unemployment rates of 4 or 5% or the like. So I think, you know, we're very concerned about that dynamic playing out again. I think one silver line, no pun intended, one silver lining is we will have a tighter labor market in the decade ahead due to the demographics. As the baby boomers continue to retire, that's going to put pressure on the labor market. It's going to be harder for businesses to find workers due to the working age population not really growing that quickly, which should help with wage growth, particularly for our lower income households. So I think that's, you know, once we get past the cycle, the business cycle component, I think we'll see some better growth, obviously.
Great, thank you. Sheila Greenlaw Fink asked this question. As eviction moratoriums expire and rental assistance is insufficient to help many remain housed, how do you see costs related to homelessness impacting our economy in terms of workforce productivity, healthcare costs, et cetera? That question is tied to what you were just talking about.
Yeah, that's a really hard one because, you know, when you see the homeless population increasing in good times, you know, and in bad, it's hard to make some comments there. And of course, you know, sometimes it can be, you know, it's a little tautological to talk about it, but like the reason people are homeless is because they literally cannot afford a house or a home or an apartment. And so housing costs are a very key component and driver there. We've struggled with that for decades now. I think during a recession, we might get a little bit better balance, particularly with the continued large supply of multifamily apartments, particularly close in Portland. As those migration rates drop, a lot of apartments, migration dropping, that's going to create better supply-demand balance. So rents will soften at least. That should have some knock-on effects across the housing markets, but whether that's, you know, enough to alleviate homelessness or not, you know, that's probably not. So I'm very concerned about that. I don't have much more to say than that. I'm sorry.
That's great. Thank you. And Josh, we've gone through all of the questions. I want to give you, you know, kudos. You can see in the chat that people really appreciate your perspective. The one last question I'd like to ask you is, can you tell us when you will be updating this information and how do we stay tuned with you to make sure we're aware of what your forecasts are?
Yeah, I'm getting the date. So we do a quarterly forecast. So every 3 months, looking at the actual, so September 23rd, right? So the next one, September 23rd is our next release date officially to the legislature. And we do this ongoing, right? In good times and in bad, we're doing it every 3 months. And we'll see, you know, we'll have some real data. So this last forecast we just released a couple weeks ago, we had no real data. We built this in April. We built the forecast in April when the only thing we had was that big spike in initial claims for unemployment insurance. That's the only data we had. Now we'll have at least a couple monthly employment reports, and we'll be able to think through some of the hard data a little bit better. So how will that change our thinking on the outlook? It's still to be determined. But I think, you know, that's really where we'll be here in a couple months.
Well, we will ask if you will, maybe we should ask to put you on the calendar right now for that September timeframe. We'll be working with you to make sure that we can provide this information to our members. So thank you so much. You, as always, you did an excellent job, and both in the presentation and answering questions. So thank you. And I want to remind our participants that the information will be on our website. And in closing, I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Northwest Natural for bringing this information to us. And also, I want to thank Legacy Health for being our Forum Series sponsor. With that, I'd also like to tell you what our upcoming events are. So, Teresa, if you could put that slide up. Well, and before we do that, we also like to put in a plug for membership. So if you're not a member of Westside Economic Alliance, please look at our website and join us. We'd love to have you as a member. If you have any questions, you can call any of the people on this slide or email us. All the information is on our website. And our upcoming events are, we have a Land Use and Housing Committee meeting on June 17th. We're looking at the topic of how the planning departments work with the economic development departments to work through the business recovery. We have our WEA Board of Directors meeting on June 24th. Our Transportation Committee is scheduled for July 8th, and that's going to be focusing on tolling. We've got Lucinda from ODOT that's going to be doing the same presentation she did to the Region 1 Act on the tolling project that's looking at Clackamas, but also what the effects are region-wide. And then on August 28th, we have our only fundraiser, our golf scramble. There are still slots available for teams. This is, we're working closely with the golf course to make sure we are practicing all of the appropriate practices to ensure safety. So we're looking forward to our fundraiser, and we hope you can participate in that. So also, we will be doing a survey. You'll get a survey sent to you by email asking you for information on the this program and to help us look toward future programs and improving how we're doing this. So again, thank you. Catherine, any last words you'd like to share?
No, just thank you to Josh and all the work that you and your team are doing. We're all very interested in what you're saying and relying upon you for your excellent analysis. So thank you very much for your information today.
And thank you to all of our participants. We look forward to seeing you, hearing you, and communicating in this platform for the next few months. We'll see what the future holds. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.